All right. Welcome to another Cloudways live webinar. Really excited to have you all here today. We have a fantastic program up ahead. So if you're hanging out with us on the live stream, go ahead and sit back, relax, and let's have a great conversation around pricing, how to maximize profits using value pricing and selling. We're hanging out with Robert Da Costa today. Robert is an agency coach. He's been doing this for over 15 years. Prior to that, he had his own marketing and PR agency for 11 years, doing revenues in excess of 1.5 million pounds per year. We're going to be talking about a lot of topics today around pricing, but I just wanted to welcome Robert on to the program today. Robert, great to have you with us.
Yeah, fantastic. Great to be here as well, Brent. I'm really excited to stand on my soapbox and talk about why we should not be selling time, why we should be talking about value, and why we first of all need to find a clear niche for our agency.
Pricing is a fun topic. We're actually, this is our second webinar this month where we're kind of broaching this topic around pricing. I'm curious for you, Rob, because you're spending a lot of time talking to people about pricing. Like, why is pricing something that you're passionate about helping agency owners out with their business?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, if we're running a business and we're not profitable, then what's the point of doing it? So, and I think I see so many agencies getting this wrong and then finding themselves dug into a trench, and then they find it really difficult to remove themselves from that because they've got so used to pricing in a certain way. And I think when we start out, a lot of us have started out as freelancers and then we grow our agencies. So we've very much been used to selling an hourly rate or a daily rate, and then that's what we keep doing as we grow, and then we find it harder and harder to increase our prices. We find it harder and harder to be profitable. We find it harder and harder to look different to our competitors. And so it's kind of untangling that bowl of pricing spaghetti is often one of the first conversations I have with a lot of my clients. And I've worked with hundreds of agencies now, so I've seen sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think there's two pieces to getting pricing right. One of them is how you structure your pricing. And, obviously we're going to talk about that, whether you're selling time, whether you're selling fixed fees, whether you're value selling, payment by results, all that kind of stuff. But what goes hand in hand in that is getting your mindset right. Because if you don't have the right mindset around your pricing, it doesn't matter what conversations we have, you're going to always be sitting there going, yeah, I understand that, Rob, but I can't change it. So I think we have to tackle two things here, the mindset and the actual pricing strategy.
You mentioned, and I love that you bring up mindset around pricing right off the bat. I think even just on a basic level, when somebody knows they're underpricing, and we know it deeply. We know, like, man, I could be charging more for this. Or maybe you've got these legacy clients where they got a sweetheart deal. I mean, I had clients that were, we were like years into our business, downtown office, full team. I mean, I think my team, the cost per hour of somebody working on an account was well over like $65 an hour. But there was a client that we had brought on when I was 18 years old or whatever. And, that was the price they got then. And they just, we just couldn't bring ourselves to change that, which is such a weird thing, right? Like literally we're subsidizing this business. But so maybe let's dive into some of that mindset stuff first. I'm sure a lot of our listeners out there can relate with this. I think most people have probably some reservations about whether they're pricing correctly or not right now, or maybe have some fear or anxiety around raising their prices, or that last moment before you hit send on a proposal, and for some unknown reason we go in there and we mark it down. So let's start with that mindset topic. What's kind of your key or secret to helping people around pricing mindset?
I think the simplest thing that I say to people is that it's not your money. And so it's not up to you to judge whether you're cheap or expensive. It's up to the client. And of course, that then ties into the value, because if the client sees the value of what you do, then they're going to pay the fee. So I think one of the things we have to do is we have to change our mindset around whether we think something is expensive or cheap, or whether we think something is worth it. And I also think we have to change our mindset around increasing pricing. Like, I don't know how it is in other parts of the world, but in the UK, when you buy utilities such as broadband or gas and electricity, every January, you are going to get a letter saying your prices are going up. Doesn't mean the service has changed at all, but your prices are going up. And we expect that. Although we don't like it, we accept it. Yet agencies are so reticent about reviewing their prices and increasing their prices every year. So I think you just have to get into like a structure of saying this is what we do, and you sow the seed with your client early on in the prospecting stage. But you also just have to stop thinking about whether you think something is expensive or not.
In that, I think is like, I just want to hang out in that. Like, it's not your money, and you're not saying that from a not respecting the value of money standpoint. And because I think a lot of times we look at the value, the talents that we have or the skills that we have, and we think about it applying to our own worldview. And if we're running a small consultancy, doing a couple $100,000 a year, like, we might actually not understand the value that our skills or the impact that we'd have on a business that's doing millions of dollars a year or tens of millions of dollars a year or hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Like, they have a totally different lens of how they view the value. And what I'm hearing from you is stop applying your own lens of that value necessarily, and really try to shift and think about, okay, well, what impact is this going to have on my clients? And it's their money, it's their investment, they're going to get the return, and I need to really let go of, whether I think this is worth $100,000 or not.
Yeah, and this so ties into the value selling and value pricing approach. Sorry, we're getting an echo here, aren't we? It's a bit of value selling and value pricing, because if you're thinking about the value you deliver, it becomes much easier to sell a higher fee. Whereas if you're thinking about the hours it's going to take, an hourly rate, then the clients, you're obviously going to have a dim view of like increasing that price.
Yeah. So let's go into some of the logistics here around pricing for a quick second. And just because we are we're on Facebook Live, I want to kind of come back to what we're hanging out with today. We're talking to Rob Da Costa. So if you guys are just now joining us, we're talking about The Price is Right, maximizing profits using value pricing and selling. So we're talking about pricing. If you all have questions for Rob today, why don't you go find the comments below, questions about pricing, how to price your services. Let us know in the comments below. Happy to answer those questions live with Rob. And let's get back to this conversation. So one of the things that you mentioned earlier was the structure around pricing. And you mentioned a few different things, right? Time and why people shouldn't be billing hourly, fixed, retainers, some pay-for-performance stuff. How do people figure out what kind of structure of pricing that they should do?
Okay, the first thing you need to do, and I want to acknowledge, first of all, before we jump into this, that this isn't easy. And if you've been used to selling hours or days to clients, I totally get that it's hard to shift that. But what I want you to think about is building a brick wall between how you price internally, because we need to monitor time, and we need to work out what resources and hourly rates that people are working at, so that we can make sure that we're hitting our margins and profits. But you need to build a brick wall between that and what you sell to your clients, because fundamentally you are not selling time and clients are not buying time. And if you sell time to clients, you commoditize what you do. Because if I'm selling a web design project and I've quoted 20 days at $750 a day, and someone else is quoted 20 days at $650 a day, then now I'm comparing hourly rates or daily rates to daily rates. And that's not what the client's buying. And so the client is buying an outcome, and the client is buying a transformation. And that transformation is always from being in pain to not being in pain. And let me just tell you a story, first of all, about this to highlight this. A true story, but a great example. And I've told this many times. So a couple of years ago, I woke up on a Saturday morning and I had a really bad toothache at the back of my mouth. No dentists were open on a Saturday, had a sleepless night on Saturday night, taking lots of painkillers, didn't do anything. If you've had toothache before, you know how it feels. Sunday, woke up, really bad toothache, getting worse. Same thing happened on Sunday. Monday morning, I'm right on the phone to the dentist, really bad toothache, can I get an appointment? So I get an emergency appointment. dash to the dentist. I sit in the dentist chair. They take an x-ray and they say, you've got really bad infection. The best thing to do, Rob, is to extract your tooth. I'm like, don't care what you do, just get rid of the pain. And it was a very quick procedure, surprisingly, really easy to extract the tooth. And almost instantly, my pain had gone. And then I walk up to the dentist reception afterwards, and the dentist says to me, that's £400, please. Now, imagine if I turned around to the dentist and said, blimey, I was only in the chair for half an hour and you're charging me £400. And the dentist says, well, if I took 4 hours to get rid of your pain, so that's £100 an hour, would that make it more valuable to you? And of course, the answer is no, because I wanted the dentist to get rid of my pain as quickly as possible. And when we sell our services, what we need to do is identify the pain and the transformation that the client is looking for, from not being in pain to not being in pain. And we need to talk about that transformation, and we need to talk about that transformation in our proposal, and we need to price against that transformation, because that's what the client's buying. So there's 4 things that we do, and again, you need to build this wall between these 4. So on the left hand side, we have inputs, and inputs are the time and materials that we need. Let's take designing a website. So inputs are the time, the people, the software that we need to deliver the service. Then the next box we've got is outputs, and the outputs are the deliverables from the inputs. So the outputs could be the initial brief, they could be some initial designs, a wireframe, and so on. That's what we do, but that's not what the client buying. So then when we step across to the other side of the brick wall, and now we're standing in the client's shoes, they're buying outcomes. And outcomes are, what is the result of the transformation? So the outcome could be, our website doesn't represent our brand. We can't do some of the e-commerce aspects that we want on our website. It's really difficult for our customers to use. So the transformation is from that to a new website that's really customer focused, easy to make bookings on, or whatever it is. That's the outcome. That's what the client's buying. That's the got rid of my pain, got rid of my toothache. And then the 4th thing they're buying is impact. And impact is like, what's the longer term impact of our intervention? So what's the longer term impact for us as a company that have bought a new website that is really easy for our clients to use, that's really engaging, and the net result is we get more bookings and more sales? That's the longer term impact. And when we're selling, we need to focus on the outcomes and the impact, and not on the inputs and the outputs. So I hope that sort of makes sense. But the important message really here is building this wall between what we do internally and what the client buys. And too many people sell on inputs and outputs. They tell their clients, this is what we're going to do, this is how long it's going to take, this is how many hours it's going to take. And if I can, Brent, let me just tell you another story, because this happened last week. So I have a client that uses a copywriter, and the copywriter writes copy for their website and does some of their blogs and so on. So they asked their copywriter to write a more detailed guide, which they were going to use as a tool to give away to their audience. So the copywriter quoted 3 days at a day rate of whatever, and that was mistake number 1. And then fast forward a couple of weeks, the copywriter delivers the draft of the copy and sends an invoice for 3 days at whatever the rate was, and says, dear so-and-so, please find the draft of the copy. I actually did 3.5 days work, but I'm only going to charge you for 3 days. So I'm doing you a big favor. And then the client read the copy, and it was shocking. And they were really disappointed. And they were like, Rob, what do we do about this? The supplier thinks that they've done this amazing job and gone this extra mile because they've done an extra day's time, and we only paid for 3 days of their time. But actually the output and the outcome was not good. And so they ended up sort of falling out with the copywriter. And the mistake was that they should have talked to the copywriter and said, like, we're not really buying 3 days of your time. We're buying this outcome. And this outcome is a quality piece of copy that meets the brief that we've given you. And they actually gave the copywriter a detailed brief, clarity around who the customer was. And yet that's an example of what happens if we sell time and we get it wrong. And just one more story before I stop talking, a personal story. When I first started coaching, I sold days. And the very first client I met, went to meet with them, quoted days at a certain day rate, and he came back to me and he said, Rob, we really like you, but we've met another coach, and this other coach is £150 a day cheaper than you. So if you can match their rate, we'll hire you. So what choice did I have at that stage? I had three choices. Could stand fast and probably lose the business. I can discount my services in order to win the business, or I can just walk away from it. So I discounted, because obviously it was my first client. I discounted my work, and immediately, they were undervaluing it. And whereas if you went back to the dentist story and you said to the dentist, look, you've quoted £400 to get rid of my pain. That's quite a lot. Can you make it any cheaper? Well, with a value sale, the dentist could say, well, maybe if I don't give you an injection, any anesthetic, I can lower the price to £300. And I'd be going, no, I want the anesthetic because I'm a coward. I don't want to be in pain while you're extracting the tooth. And it's like, well, okay, well, if you want the anesthetic, it's £400. And it's much harder to discount when you're selling value than it is when you're selling time, because time is just a commodity, and an hour of my time looks just like an hour of somebody else's time. But you just have to remember that the client isn't buying time, they're buying the outcome or the impact.
Rob, I'm loving everything you're saying. This is brilliant. I hope our listeners out there are taking copious notes around their mindset around pricing. That's what we're talking about today. We're hanging out with Rob Da Costa. The Price is Right, maximizing profits using value pricing and selling. Rob just walked us through kind of those 4 areas to look at with your clients. You got those inputs, those outputs, those outcomes, the impact you're having on your clients, and focus more of your attention on the outcomes and the impact when you're thinking about your pricing. And if you have questions for Rob, find us in chat and let us know as we go through this. Just want to give a shout out to Mario, who's hanging out with us today. Good to see you, man, from Italy. So Rob, I do have a question though, because I love everything that you're talking about so far, right? But I think I went to school for economics, and I think about price in supply and demand, right? And whether I'm selling a commodity or a service, it doesn't really matter, right? At some point, the market is only willing to bear a certain price for all of this stuff, right? Whether we're talking about outputs or inputs or whatever, and and obviously your coaching client is a great example, right? Your client probably improperly was thinking they were comparing apples to apples, right? In reality, services are a lot harder to compare apples to apples. But even so, right? Even with value-based pricing, the market has a number, or that client has a number, right? At some point, you're going to get a no, right? Maybe it's not at $200 an hour, maybe it's not at $300 an hour, but maybe at $30,000 an hour. Right? I mean, there's at some point, there's going to be an upper limit to that type of situation. So how do we explore that, right? How do we find that upper limit without feeling like we are, maybe tipping the scales a little bit too far, which could probably be damaging to our business, or maybe it could be damaging to our client's business, or maybe they do write an awesome copy, for a page, but maybe and maybe the client loves it, but maybe it doesn't get the ROI. And maybe the client feels great the day they get the copy, but maybe in 6 months they're like, that was kind of a waste of money. We didn't actually get that ROI on that really expensive copy, right? So how can you give advice to people to try to find that upper limit, right, of what the market is willing to bear for their services?
Yeah, so I'm not advocating being super expensive. I'm not advocating that at all. And in fact, this brings us on to the other conversations around niching, because fundamentally, the more specialist you are, the more clear your market niche is, the higher your fees would be. If I had really bad toothache, I would go to an expert dentist. I wouldn't go to my GP. And guess what? If I was paying for those two things, the expert dentist is going to be, much more specialist than the GP. And even in that, I had I'm making my teeth sound terrible, but I had to have some implants a number of years ago. I went to a dentist that had specialist implant expertise, not the general dentist, because I wanted that specialist confidence. And of course, I paid more money. So I'm not necessarily advocating always trying to be at the top end. What I would say, in a slight sort of detour here, is the really important thing is that your agency needs to be aligned. Okay, and you need to be aligned across 4 areas, and that is the market you serve, the price you charge, the product you deliver, and the service levels associated with that. And you need to choose whether you are targeting the top end of the market, the mid market, or the low end market. And whatever you choose, all of those 4 areas need to be aligned. So if I could just use airlines as an example really quickly, in the UK, we have EasyJet and we have Ryanair. I'm sure people have heard of those. They're both low-cost airlines. And everybody kind of disses on Ryanair because they make you pay for absolutely everything. Almost at one time, they wanted to make you pay to use the toilets, apparently, but that got vetoed. But they're really clear about who their market is. So they're targeting the low-end market in terms of airline travel. Their service levels are terrible. Their product is really basic, like you pay for everything. And their price is cheap. So they are aligned across those 4 areas. And so they get a big tick in the box of being really profitable. Then you take someone like British Airways and you do the same exercise, and it becomes very difficult to work out who's their target market, because they're trying to compete in the low end market, yet they want to compete with the high end airlines as well. And so they're much more confused as they've tried to broaden their reach. And as a result of it, they're nowhere near as profitable as Ryanair. So what I'm really advocating is make a choice about who you're serving, make sure your business is aligned. What you don't want to do, and what I find with a lot of agencies, is they'll say, we're targeting the mid-level market, we have a mid-level product or service, our price is cheap, and our service levels are really high, because we really go the extra mile. And guess what? When that alignment happens, you are really unprofitable. So I think you have to make a choice. And the more niche you are, the easier it is to show up as a specialist and charge higher fees. But you also have to do your research as well. You have to go and find out, like you say, Brent, what will the market bear? And like I say, I'm not advocating being the most expensive. I'm advocating being aligned and make sure those 4 areas of market, service, price, and product are aligned, being as niche as you can so that you look different. Because let's face it, when you have a clear niche, it becomes much easier for your ideal target customer to identify you as the right supplier for them. When you're a generalist, you're just standing amongst many other people, and the only way you're often going to differentiate yourself when you're a generalist is by being cheaper than the competition or by promising exceptional levels of service. And guess what? Both of those are recipes for running an unprofitable business, being a busy fool, or being a charity, as I always like to say to my clients when they are, giving so much away without charging for it. And it comes back to mindset again. Because if you don't value the things that you do, then you're going to be in trouble, and you're going to give it away for free. And one thing to be mindful of really quickly is that we sell 3 things when we sell our services to a client. We sell our expertise to be a great WordPress developer or a designer or a copywriter, or whatever it is. And that's the sort of given. We sell our strategic advice of how to get rid of the pain as quickly as possible for the client. That's like the plans and the strategy we put together. And we also sell our years of experience to be able to do that. And what I see too many agencies doing is focusing on the first thing, giving away the second and third thing for free. But guess where the thing that makes you look different to your competition sits? It doesn't sit in the first thing, it sits in the second and third area. And another really quick story, Brent, on this one. You can tell I'm a bit of a storyteller. I have a client that is a PR agency, and they recently hired a senior account director to join their business who comes from a journalistic background. They won this new client, and when they were having a conversation about what success would look like for the client said, we would really love to get our CEO interviewed on radio, blah, 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 whatever the radio station was. And it just so happens that this new hire, who the ex-journalist knows someone is really good friends with someone at that radio station, was able to pick up the phone and say, hey, it's so-and-so here. We've got this client. I think it'd be fantastic on your radio station to do an interview. The radio station said, fantastic, sorted out. Within 10 minutes, they'd achieved one of their major goals. Now, if all they were doing was selling time, what would they do? Sell 10 minutes to the client or half an hour to the client, when in fact the value to the client was worth way more than that. So it's about making sure that we sell those 3 things: your ability to do your technical skill, your strategic advice, and your years of experience that enable you to solve the problem really quickly.
So many nuggets there, Rob. And I definitely want to get more into the niching conversation. I feel like my whole world lights up whenever that happens. But I couldn't help but wonder. You mentioned the airline and charging for the toilet access. I mean, could you imagine being on your way to go to the bathroom and you're like, I don't have my wallet, and they're like, well, right? And obviously it's kind of funny, right? And but sometimes I do feel like there are times that people get really into like pricing everything, and just giving that caution of, when you do get really into pricing, it is about your clients being able to pay you for the services and the value that you do. And, whatever that charging for the toilet access looks like within your business, right? You want to be careful not to do that, because there is, like, we want to make sure we're getting valued for our time, but there is also a customer experience thing here. And I've seen agencies do this where they like sell their client on a project, and then like immediately they get into the project and they're already, upselling and cross-selling before anything has ever even started. And while there could be a reason for that, because they've requested out of scope stuff, sometimes it's also can create a bad customer experience, right? And it does show up in that space as well. So let's make sure our listeners don't charge for toilet access, because that could turn into a literal mess.
Well, and you know what, Brent, on that note, very few agencies are going to choose to be the down arrow across those 4 areas. It just so happens that Ryanair have chosen to be that. And what that means is that you can buy an airline ticket for £25. But if you buy an airline ticket for £25 that you could pay for the same destination for £250 on British Airways, well, what do you expect for the £25? No wonder they want to charge you for going to the toilet. I think it's crazy, and they scrapped that idea, but it was genuinely something they were thinking about. But I completely agree. I think very few agencies will choose to be that down alignment, because that looks like some kind of online business, like where you would have very little customer interaction. You would, it looks like a GoDaddy type business, I imagine. But I think very few of us would choose that. And I think we also have to overlay our culture and our values onto all of this, because we all want to do a good job for our clients. We all want to build great empathy and great relationships with our clients. But we have to know where the line is drawn, where it's okay to go the extra mile and overservice by 10%. But when that looks like 20, 30, 40%, we are in trouble. Because once we've set that as a precedent of what we will do in terms of over-servicing, now we've always got to do it. And there is a real danger there. So it's a case of knowing where your boundaries are. Don't be, we say in the UK, jobs worth about this, because we have to be flexible, and needs change, and we need to listen to our clients. And if we want to build long-term relationships, we've got to build empathy, and we've got to be willing to go the extra mile. We all want to help our clients. We all want to help them get to that transformation, be out of pain as quickly as possible. But we are also running commercial, profitable businesses and not charities.
You've heard it from Rob. We are not running charities with our clients. I want to come back to the niching conversation here in just a quick second. I got to give a shout out, though, to our amazing hosts that are making this possible today, Rob. Want to just let you all know that are listening today about Cloudways, about their agency partnership program. Cloudways has made this event possible. They bring people like myself and Rob to you on a regular basis to deliver high-value content to you as an agency owner, so that you can grow your business, achieve more freedom in your business, create a more scalable, profitable enterprise. So if you have not yet checked out Cloudways, definitely check them out as an agency. They've got this amazing agency partner program where they kind of treat agency customers a little bit different than people that come in as off the street and through their retail business. Why? Because agencies are different. You have a lot of stakeholders in your business. You've got your team. You've got a lot of clients to manage. You have a different type of business. So they've created the agency partner program with so much insight, so many customer interviews, so much conversation about how do we serve agencies in the way that they need to be served. So if you haven't yet signed up for the agency partner program, check that out. I'm throwing a link in chat, cloudways.com/agency. And you can get some special pricing for agency owners. You get some dedicated support channels depending on what level you're at. And there's exclusive agency benefits, like more great content like this, live coaching, and some other awesome things that they're bringing to you. So right now, the Agency Partner Program is on a wait list. So if you are interested in it, I definitely want to encourage you to sign up as soon as you can so that when they're opening that up to more agencies, you can be first to know. So check that out, cloudways.com/agency. Cloudways makes all of this possible, and we're really happy to have them as a partner and a leader in our markets to make all of this possible.
For sure. They are such a good example of providing great value to their audience and doing things like this to help educate people. It's everything that I tell my clients to do as well in their their marketing. So great for Cloudways.
Big fans of Cloudways. So I want to come back to the conversation around niche, Rob. I know you and I both are huge advocates of specialization. I tell people, it's not required. It's not absolutely, you don't have to. Obviously, there's, general family doctors and there are spine surgeons, right? And there's pros and cons to both of them. But I personally believe, and I know you do as well, that the more specialized that you can become, oftentimes the more value you can deliver to a smaller group of people. And oftentimes that's the recipe for, explosive growth, and particularly around profit, because, your contributions to a business, like your tooth getting pulled, become a lot more valuable, right? Versus just the everyday kind of cleaning stuff. Yeah. So let's dive into that niche conversation and understand how this kind of impacts pricing. You mentioned earlier that your years of experience, your ability to drive strategy, your expertise have a really big impact on your overall pricing strategy within a market. So talk to me about why niche is important.
Yeah. Listen, this is the one that I would stand on my soapbox for ages talking about, because it drives me crazy when people just refuse to do it. And this is another mindset conversation, I think, because people say, oh yeah, but if I go niche, I'm going to lose all these opportunities. So I always say to them, well, how many of those opportunities that you fear you're losing are you actually winning as a generalist? So I think, again, mindset's a big conversation today. You have to get the mindset in place that the more niche I am, the easier it becomes to identify my perfect client, the easier it becomes for my ideal client to find me. And, obviously, as I show up as an expert, I can charge higher fees than the generalist. So I think I am a massive advocate with clients being niche, and I'll often start a new project with a client by just exploring this with them. And it's interesting that people tend to put their foot in the pond and then take it out again. So people will say, oh yeah, we're niche, we focus on the hospitality sector. And then I'll look on their website, and there's nowhere on their website does it say they focus on the hospitality sector. So if you're going to commit to a niche, you have to show up as that in all of your outbound communications, in the way you talk about your agency and so on. I think one of the things that stops people becoming niche is they don't know how to go about finding their niche. And so for me, it was easy. Again, another quick story. So the first probably 2 years of me running my coaching practice after I sold my agency, I was trying to be a generalist coach. So in theory, I could work with a big corporate one day and then the next day go and work with a small startup. But the reality was that I didn't have the background experience to win the big corporates. And then if I went to the startup and said, oh yeah, I work for this big corporate too, they'd be sitting there thinking, well, Rob, you won't be able to help me because you won't understand me. And the minute I decided to niche down to work with marketing agencies, because that was my background, so it was an easy choice, my business started to really take off. So my personal story sort of advocates the need to niche. I just wanted to say that you can niche 4 ways. So people always think niching means by the industry sector, like I work in finance or hospitality, but just think that you can cut it 4 ways. And I've just kind of written this down to give you some examples as well. So you can cut it by geography, so the area that you serve. So if you're a web development company, you would say we create websites for businesses in London. That would be one way of niching. You can obviously niche by industry or the sector that you work in. So we create websites for gaming businesses. That would be a sector. You can also cut it by the deliverable that you deliver the client. So we create e-commerce WordPress websites. And the fourth area, which very few people use, but is a really strong one, is that you can cut it by the problem that you solve for your clients. So for a web developer, it would we generate new business leads by improving your online presence through web development and SEO services. And of course, we can take a combination of those four as well. So let me be sort of a smart ass here and try and combine all four. And this is a mouthful, and you wouldn't do this, but it would be, we create new business leads by improving your online presence by developing e-commerce WordPress websites for gaming businesses in London. So you can cut it in those four ways. And I always say to people, when they're doing some analysis to try and work out what their niche should be, they need to look back at their past clients if they've got that history, and look at the clients where they've been most profitable. Look at the clients where they've had the most enjoyment working on that account, and look at where their passion lies. And if you can overlap, if you think of a Venn diagram, if you can overlap those three areas, that's going to help you identify your niche. So I think the first thing that stops the two things that stop people niching is, one, this mindset belief that they'll lose business that they're not even currently winning. And second of all is not knowing how to work out their niche. But of course, if you decide to niche down, that doesn't mean you're stuck there forevermore. It means you can ebb and flow over the time. But quite frankly, the more specialist you are, the more niched you are, the easier it will be for you to win clients, and the easier it will be for your clients to find you. And of course, you can charge higher fees.
Something that, and I love those four categories. I think that's awesome and gives clarity to people to figure out kind of who they are and who they serve. And also, are you winning the business anyways, right? I mean, I think that, you brought up the website as an example. Now, one thing I want to know your take on this, because I have some thoughts around this, but the website, right? You choose a market overnight, and I did this. I was sitting in I remember it was a Wendy's, a fast food restaurant at the time, with my business partner, and we were like, oh man, everybody's telling us to niche, right? We should niche, right? And we had done a lot of work with nonprofits, and so we decided that nonprofits were our niche. And at the time, our homepage said, we make great websites, and it had a bunch of different client examples. And then we left the Wendy's that day all excited, and we went home and said, we make great websites for nonprofits. And then we just put nonprofits on our website. And, our leads evaporated. 70% of our general business leads that we were getting disappeared. The nonprofit leads were maybe a little warmer and more excited to talk to us, but it was like, oh my gosh, what did we do? We just turned off this spigot of business that, payroll was due, and, payroll didn't really care that we had declared our niche or not. It was like, hey, it's every 2 weeks, 25K, every 2 weeks, 25K. Right. So I think there was a moment where we were excited about the niche concept. We thought we were making some of the moves in the right direction, but it ended up kind of damaging our business in the short term. So, I have stuff that I kind of advise people to how they make those transitions, but I'm always looking for, different and interesting takes. So how do you recommend people start to take action in a market once they've made that decision?
Well, the first thing is, you don't have to fire all your old clients that don't fit in that niche. That's the really important point. And your current clients are probably not looking at your website on a daily basis, if we use that as an example. So I have an architect as a client, and I've worked with them for years, and they're not a marketing agency, but I really enjoy working with them. I make a difference for them. So that's why I keep them on. I never felt the need to fire any clients that didn't fit in my niche when I decided to go down that route. The second thing is, you've obviously got to do your research before you just change your homepage on your website, and you've got to understand that market and understand the best ways of engaging with them. And the other thing I'd say, I think this is a whole other topic, Brent, but is talk about the pain on your website. Don't start off by saying we create websites. What's the solution? What's the pain that those nonprofits have that you can solve for them? Because your website should kind of get someone hooked, show someone very quickly that you empathize with the challenges that your target customer has. So they're thinking, tell me more. And tell me more looks like scrolling down the page or clicking on the next link. So I think I always say your website needs to be about your customers before it's about you, but that's a whole other topic. But do your research first of all. There's no point niching. I'm talking American here. Niching down to a sector that there just isn't a big enough market, or a sector where you're trying to charge here but they're used to paying here. You've got to do your research first of all. You need to transition into that new niche. You need to think about your marketing strategy, which is so much more than just your website. I always say to people, look, your website might be the center of your universe where you're driving traffic to, and then when they get there, you want to make it very clear what you want them to do next, whether that's be download something, book a call with you, or whatever. But you need to look at all those other areas that you're going to focus your marketing and your sales on. You need to do your competitive research to find out what other people are doing, what they're saying. You need to understand who your ideal target customer is in that niche, and understand the things that keep them awake at night, those pains that they're trying to solve. And then you just need to learn to speak their language. So I think do that research, be really thorough in that research first of all, and then have your strategy for evolving that. But you don't need to throw the baby out the bathwater. You don't need to fire your clients. I don't think you need to worry too much about your website saying this, but you do this for other clients, because I don't think your clients on a regular basis are looking at your website. You can even explain it to them if you feel the need to. So I don't know what you would add to that, Brent, in your sort of advice to people, but that's what I would say to people. What I feel I need to do is remove the fear that they have, get their mindset changed, and help them see the benefits of niching.
Dude, I love 100% on all points. I think the if I were to add, the nuance for me is, and I think you were kind of saying it with the research, is really getting out into your market first. And that's the piece that, if I could go back in time, like the first action for us shouldn't have been to update the website and proclaim, this, because that's like the easy thing, right? Like, as a web designer, it's like, oh, I can open up my, my code editor. I can change that H1 and like, ta-da, we've niched, right? And I think as somebody who likes to sit behind the computer and do really focused work, going to a nonprofit conference, not knowing anybody, not having a network, or calling on people in the market that I don't know, and building relationships. Like back then, like that was a terrifying prospect. And what I learned, though, I think we're now on our 13th niche, and it's not something that happens overnight. But what I learned was that's the work that has huge ROI. And sometimes your website or your marketing collateral should kind of be the last thing that kind of gets up to date. Like going out there and actually immersing yourself into that market, it feels like it's uncomfortable work. You're having conversations with people, you don't get the language. Like I almost imagine, my family and I want to go to France, right? And spend some time in France. And I imagine that first week, even I took French in college, but don't quiz me, don't like put me on the spot. Like there's no French that still lives in this body, right? But that first week, I imagine, is going to be like, if we went there for a month or a year or whatever, it's probably going to be brutal and uncomfortable. And maybe even there's going to be some embarrassing moments. And I think that's something that I try to prepare people for within niching. If you don't currently have a hardcore expertise in a market, is, there's going to be this like learning curve. And, Seth Godin calls it the dip, right? Where you kind of go, you get like a quick win, and then it's like dark night of the soul, like having to, learn that sometimes things take a little bit of time. Sometimes it's hard to learn the language. Is there anything that you do, Rob, to kind of prepare people on a mindset level? Because it's, I think it's easy for, guys like us who have niched, who have helped a lot of people niche, that we're like, trust me, it's going to work. It's going to work. It's going to work. Right. But there is that like human component to it, that transformation, as you've said, right? Like getting your tooth pulled out, for example, like there's a moment where like, even when they're putting in the pain medicine, like it's super painful. How do you prepare clients for that transformation?
Yeah, so I'm going to say my favorite expression that I say to a client at least once a day, and this is a perfect example of slowing down to speed up. Right, slow down, invest, do this research that you just mentioned, Brent, and I'll say something else about that in a sec, in order to get to the end result quicker. because what you don't want to do is make loads of mistakes, make loads of assumptions that you know what your market wants and you're going to go for it, because we've all been there. I mean, blimey, I've launched products before that I was absolutely sure people wanted, and then it turned out to be a vitamin pill and not a painkiller, and it didn't work. So there's this theory called jobs to be done, which some people might have heard of. It's not my theory. I'm not that smart to have come up with this, but I advocate all my clients to do this. And jobs to be done theory simply says, when someone buys my service, what's the job they're trying to get done in their business? And if you can go and do some research in this new sector, so that means you need to find a few friendly faces, but you need to do sort of 5 to 7 interviews. If you could know some people that could introduce you to people in your sector who would be your ideal target customer, and you can get a warm introduction so they may not know you, you need to go and spend 10 or 15 minutes interviewing them, doing some jobs to be done interviews, so that you can understand what's the job to be done when they hire you. Now, when you do that, you want to record it, because really importantly is that you want to use their language, not your paraphrased language, in your sales and marketing. So if you're thinking about ultimately changing your website, you can use language that you've consistently heard from your ideal target customer audience. When you've been doing these interviews, you're going to be onto a winner. Because what you want, for example, with a website, is you want someone to read it and they say, oh, blimey, this is just like it's talking to me. They are reading my mind. And when your marketing does that, you've hit bingo, and that's how it works. But that starts by going out and talking to your market and doing jobs to be done interviews where you're finding out. And another tip here, Brent, is that when you start winning clients, you want to do jobs to be done interviews as soon as you win them. Don't do it 6 months afterwards, because they've forgotten why they bought from you. So the whole point about a jobs to be done interview for a new client is, why did they buy from you? What were the pain they were in? What's the transformation they were looking for, and all that stuff. But you can do it with an audience that doesn't know you and hasn't bought from you there, to understand the pains and the things that they're trying to achieve when they would buy the service from a business like yours. And so that I would advise people to do that. I've got a client at the moment that is a branding agency, and they've just come out the other side of doing this. And it's just amazing the impact it's had and how it's altered their language, because we project our own language onto our marketing, our sales, our conversations, and yet it's the language of the client that we need to be using. And that's why videoing or recording the conversations, if you're doing it over Zoom, it's easy to record it and then transcribing them, and then taking the 7 interviews that you've done and just looking for that common language. That's your gold nuggets that you want to be using in your marketing and your positioning. And it's also going to influence the product or the service that you offer your audience.
That's awesome. I saw this in the comments. Picha brought up one of our other Cloudways Mavericks, that Dana DiTomaso was talking about this at her for her design summit that's coming up, of the job to be done. I don't know where it originally appeared. I know I read it first in Clayton Christensen's book, How Will You Measure Your Life? He kind of had, I think, a whole chapter on.
He was the person that came out with it, and he talked about milkshakes and McDonald's. Yep. I don't know. Yeah, so that's
the milkshake example, and like they kept trying to come up with new innovative flavors, and they realized that half of their market was commuters, which is like super weird. And so like what a commuter wants is, not a mess in their car. They don't want, they want something that's going to last long, keep them full, right? And versus me as the milkshake customer is with my son. The one time I get to say yes to him, right? So totally different customer groups, right? Like making kiddo happy, early morning, like want this to go as fast as possible, right? Whereas like me, McDonald's, like we want to, draw this out, keep kid occupied for as long as possible, right?
Well, it's interesting because what that research showed them is that their competitor wasn't Burger King or Wendy's. Their competitor was a donut or a bagel, because it was breakfast stuff. But the problem with donuts and bagels is that they don't keep you full and they make a mess on your commute. So that's what the jobs to be done interview showed him, that actually McDonald's need to change their marketing to promote, this alternative as a breakfast, which sounds crazy to me because I cannot remember the last time I bought a McDonald's milkshake. It was a long time ago. But the message is really good. We need to do this in our businesses so we really understand our clients, and it will make you feel much more confident about the niche that you're heading towards if you have done that research already.
Absolutely. And I think to date, I'm not sure if I've ever bought a milkshake first thing in the morning. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, right? Milkshake. But hey, there's a market for everything, apparently. So we're getting close to wrapping today, Rob. I'd love to give one more shout out to our amazing host here. Cloudways makes this platform possible. If you haven't checked them out yet, check them out, cloudways.com/agency. If you're currently a Cloudways customer and you're an agency, you definitely got to get in the agency partner program. If you're brand new to Cloudways and you're looking for a cloud hosting partner, Cloudways definitely is worth a look. You should check them out, cloudways.com/agency. We've moved all of our stuff over to Cloudways. The team has been absolutely amazing. We've actually been able to dial up our profitability. We've been able to remove some of the complex headaches of having our own internal, sysadmin and DevOps team. We really rely on Cloudways as a true partner, and they're taking their agency program to the next level. And speaking of customer development and going out and actually talking to your customers and understanding the problem that they solve in your business, to create this program, Cloudways had dozens of conversations with agency partners, did exactly what Rob's talking about, transcribed, shared with the team, dissected every single thing that an agency owner said that would make it work better for them as a business and a business model to provide an amazing hosting service to their clients, but also to maintain that profitability and that scalability and that peace of mind. So check them out, cloudways.com/agency.
I've got one final piece of advice, if I may give it to everybody about pricing.
Let's do it.
Okay. So a really simple one. When you price projects, you need to give your clients 3 price points. And I want to tell you another really, really quick story. I'm conscious of time, but there was this guy running a live event when we were allowed to do that. And it was for agency owners, and he split the agency into 2 rooms. And he went into the first room and he said, "What do you think the average hourly rate of an agency is?" And they said it was $100 an hour. Then he went into the second group and he said, "ABC Design charges $160 an hour for their work. What do you think the average hourly rate of an agency is?" And they came back and said $125. And that is a really good example of anchoring. And that is why when you quote, you should always give 3 price points. So your high price point is your anchor point. The midpoint is the price that you really want the client to buy at. And the low price point is the minimal sort of viable product that you could give them that hopefully people won't pick. And you will find that 9 times out of 10 people go for that mid price point. And actually, when you use that strategy, you can then start increasing your prices as well. So just as another thing that I get all my clients to do is that when you're quoting, use 3 price points and get a budget from your client before you quote. I've got a stat here that is astounding, that apparently only 19% of agencies know their clients' budgets before they start writing a quote. And don't you think that is absolutely crazy?
That definitely is crazy. Definitely want to get a price or a budget. I'm sorry. Leverage anchoring as a pricing strategy. And you heard it from Rob. Come to the table with 3 packages. First one's anchor. Second one is that kind of ideal recommendation. And that third one is your MVP, or what you would be willing to do. And also make sure that MVP is something that you would be excited to do. So I know when I first started using that pricing methodology, it was like this curmudgeon-y, I guess we'll do that, right? And we had to finally have this come to terms with every time we signed the low-end client, we were not happy internally. And I was like, okay, we got to either stop offering it or, offer something different that we're actually excited about delivering. So Rob, this has been epic. How can folks out there find out more about you? Is there anything that you have that they can check out? How do they find out more information about what you're up to?
Yeah, so head over to my website, dacostacoaching.co.uk, so dacosta.co.uk. And if you head over to the resources tab, there is tons of free downloadable content, including a value pricing guide that digs into what we talked about today. So lots of free valuable content on my website. That's the best place to go, and you can reach out to me there as well.
Awesome, dude. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, Rob. So much value around value pricing to maximize profits. and so much more. Rob, I hope to have you back on our program sometime. I know you've been doing a lot of great work supporting everything that's going on in Cloudways and within the digital agency community. I just want to give you mad props for all of the work you're doing, man. Congrats.
Fantastic. I loved it. We could have carried on talking for another hour, and I can get off my soapbox now.
We welcome all soapboxes here as long as we're delivering value, teaching agency owners. I think we're in a really good place. So, Rob, thanks again, man. That is our program today. As we said earlier, make sure you check out the Cloudways Agency Partner Program. They make all of this possible. I can't give them more shout outs and amazing love for all they do for us in the agency community. So definitely check out Cloudways. Rob, thanks again, man. And that is our program for today. Until next time, I'm Brent Weaver.